fellow Americans. I'm Paul Marks, and today is a special day for America. It is August 6, 1965, and President Lyndon Baines Johnson is passing the Civil and Voting Rights Act of 1965. Almost 95 years ago, President Grant passed the 15th Amendment, but did not enforce it due to the Jim Crow laws and voting literacy test and the hate group of the Ku Klux Klan. We are on the scene now, and President Johnson is preparing to speak. Here's Cole Martin with more information about the years between the ratification of the 15th Amendment and up to now, when President Johnson is going to enforce the acts.
Thanks, Paul. Hello, fellow Americans. Cole Martin here, reporting about the 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment was not enforced whenever it was first introduced. There were many restrictions on voting passed by states, such as literacy tests that people had to pass in order to vote. It made sure people were able to read and write before they were able to vote. At this time, most previous slaves were not literate because they were not allowed to attend school at the time. There was also violence by groups such as the KKK that would scare people from voting. This was a big issue even after an amendment was passed allowing people to vote. And here's Callie talking about the 15th Amendment.
Thanks, Cole. I'm Callie Valley, and I have been given access to the original 15th Amendment, which states, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude." Although men were granted the right, women of all races were still denied. This encouraged African Americans to vote, but due to harsh conditions, they still weren't allowed to.
Congress passes the most sweeping civil rights bill ever to be written into the law, and thus reaffirms the conception of equality for all men that began with Lincoln and the Civil War 100 years ago. The Negro won his freedom then. He wins his dignity now. 5 hours after the House passes the measure, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is signed at the White House by President Johnson. Before an audience of legislators and civil rights leaders who had labored long and hard for passage of the bill, President Johnson calls for all Americans to back what he calls a turning point in history.
We must not approach the observance and enforcement of this law in a vengeful spirit. Its purpose is not to punish. Its purpose is not to divide, but to end divisions. Divisions which have lasted all too long. Its purpose is national, not regional. This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country. So, tonight I urge every public official, every religious leader, every business and professional man, every working man, every housewife, I urge every American to join in this effort to bring justice and hope to all our people and to bring peace to our land.
There's warm applause from members of both parties as the President sets to work. It is work. He uses nearly 100 pens to affix his signature and date. Souvenirs go to Republican leader Everett Dirksen and Democratic whip Hubert Humphrey. The President seems to have mastered the art of just touching each pen to the paper. Integration leader Martin Luther King receives his pen, a gift he said he would cherish. The Department of Justice will enforce the law if necessary, and G-Man Chief J. Edgar Hoover is present. Another group of pens is reserved for the Kennedys, and the Attorney General is entrusted with a half dozen. Now, in this summer of 1964, the Civil Rights Bill is the law of the land. In the words of the President, it restricts no one's freedom so long as he respects the rights of others.